Oh my God, a coyote just went trotting past my window, which isn't that surprising if you know I live in Arizona, but is surprising if you know that I do live quite in the city. I'm not near the desert, so I don't know where that little guy came from. Okay, anyway. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Meredith. Thank you so much for being here. Quite a few book conventions have gone horribly awry recently. I wasn't really planning on making a video about either of them, mostly just because when I first heard the news that yet more book conventions had gone poorly, I was like, what more could I possibly have to say that I didn't say in either my Million Lives Book Festival video or my Sinners and Stardust video? And then I dug into them, and boy howdy, there's a lot to discuss about the events themselves, actually. So kick back, relax. It's gonna be a chatty one. It's gonna be a casual one. We're all just gonna bond over our communal confusion at the frequency to which these obviously poorly planned events are happening. So there are two conventions that are in the current conversation surrounding poorly planned book conventions. One is Romance Con, the other is Once Upon a Con. We're gonna talk about Romance Con first. I talked about Romance Con a little bit on the live I did with Mersha the other day, which you should check out if you haven't. But I will admit to you that the thoughts I shared were a little bit premature at the time. I hadn't really dug into the situation a whole lot, and so my understanding of it was that there was a Dramini fanfiction author who they were bringing to the event, and people were mad that they were bringing an author that was supportive of J.K. Rowling, given her quite transphobic views. That piece of this conversation isn't really up for debate for me. This video isn't about why I feel that way about J.K. Rowling or why the book community at large feels that way about her. For the purposes of this video, we are operating as though her transphobia is a fact, because it is, and anybody who denies that is delusional. But generally speaking, my understanding of how the majority of the book community felt was that partaking in fandom culture surrounding Harry Potter, as long as you are not monetarily supporting J.K. Rowling and are very open about the fact that you don't agree with her and you don't monetarily support her, is generally not exactly frowned upon. But it's not a hive mind, right? Some people feel very strongly that any support of the Harry Potter franchise at all is support of J.K. Rowling, while there are people out there who fully think that J.K. Rowling has so much money that more money in her pocket isn't going to make a difference, so why does it matter if you're monetarily supporting her? So there's a wide range of opinions on this topic, but it was my understanding that the majority of the opinion was that where the line was monetarily supporting J.K. Rowling, and that was kind of how I was thinking of it. It turns out that the Dramini fanfiction author is kind of a second thing that people are mad about. That's not even like the main focus of why people were upset at the convention. So that was just the majority of what I had seen, but that isn't actually the core of why people were mad. People were actually mad because the event company hosting this event is also hosting another event that has a lot of Harry Potter panels at it and seems to be celebrating Harry Potter a lot more closely in a way that people didn't like. So far beyond just having somebody who is publishing a Dramini fan fiction, I started to dig into it and I found out that the name of the event planning company is Mischief Management. If you are not familiar with Harry Potter, Mischief Managed is a code word that is used to hide the information that's on the Marauders map or something like that. I don't quite exactly remember, but it is a quote from the Harry Potter series. So the event planning company is named after the Harry Potter series. Mischief Management has existed since 2009. J.K. Rowling didn't start her villain arc until around 2016. So there's one perspective you could look at where the company predates J.K. Rowling's out of nowhere trans crash out and right-wing pivot. And so the company already existed and they had all this branding. But that happened with J.K. Rowling back in 2016, and she has not budged on her stance. It's been 9 years. They've had ample time to rebrand. And as I've mentioned, they're hosting a convention that has multiple panels that are celebrating Harry Potter. It seems as though bringing in Julie Soto, apparently in the arcs, we're marketing it as a Dramini fanfiction, which is also kind of weird. Typically when authors do that, they do not heavily market that it is a fanfiction, and apparently on the arcs it was saying that. And so it seems as though that rubbed people the wrong way and they were confused. And so they started to dig into it and found all this other stuff. And it ended up in this big push for people not to support the convention because the event organizers are clearly still in support of J.K. Rowling. I do have in my mind a video that I want to make about that conversation specifically, but there's a really important point that I plan on making in that video that I just want to say here right now. There are a lot of people who are very openly defensive of being very out and about and loud and proud Harry Potter fans and still doing things that would put money in J.K. Rowling's pocket. And they believe that just saying that they're against her views should be enough for people to understand that they don't agree with her views, and they should be allowed to still do everything they want to do in relation to the fandom, as long as they are condemning J.K. Rowling, and get very angry when people get angry about that. Listen, it is a free country. You can do whatever you want. If you want to go to Harry Potter World, you're allowed. If you want to watch all the new content they're making, you're allowed. If you want to buy the special editions of the new books, you're allowed. But other people are allowed to think that you're wrong for doing that. You can't control how other people feel. If a trans person sees you doing all of that and thinks, wow, that's a person who's not supportive of me, then they're allowed to feel that way. And you don't get to tell them that they don't get to feel that way just because you've said that's not your intention with those actions. That's just not how it works. I think there's just a lot of people out there who want to be able to do whatever they want and don't want to face the consequences of their actions or their words. They don't ever want to have to give up something that they enjoy because it's the right thing to do. As somebody who grew up with the series, who was a massive fan of it when I was a kid, I'm sure that I would get a lot of personal enjoyment out of going to Harry Potter World. But I'm not going to, because that would put money in J.K. Rowling's pocket. And I'm not going to do that. I feel like there's just a lot of people who don't understand that there are a lot of Harry Potter fans out there who wish that they could engage with the culture the way that they want to, but unfortunately, the creator has decided to head in a very hateful direction, and people don't want to support that. I don't even want to use the word sacrifice because it feels really dramatic. Yes, it's a bummer sometimes to not be able to engage with a fan culture the way that you would want to, but in comparison to the harm that J.K. Rowling's doing, really is minor. So I can anticipate people somewhat reacting to me saying this stuff in this video as saying, well, if the convention's not paying J.K. Rowling herself, then how does that not fall into what you were saying about not monetarily supporting J.K. Rowling? I do still just feel like it's too much, it's too far. When I was saying that, I meant more small fan groups that might be in your local community, or writing fan fiction that you posted on Wattpad, or reading the books that you already own, or buying them secondhand, or watching the movies that you already own or buying them secondhand. Engaging with the media in a way that doesn't put money into J.K. Rowling's pocket and potentially bonding with people in your immediate community over it is one thing. Hosting a giant event celebrating it is completely different. And having a company named after the book series is also completely different. And again, yes, the company was formed in 2009, but J.K. Rowling had her crash out in 2016 and has stayed on her crash out ever since, and it's now 2025. So they have had 9 years to rebrand, and it's not even just about not having done a rebrand. They're still hosting events where they have panels where they're very celebratory of the series. And all of that feels very different to me. And coming back around to the Hermione fanfiction itself, Hermione fanfiction was controversial even before J.K. Rowling, would one say, came out as transphobic? I don't really know how to describe what happened with her. It literally was just like one day she wasn't transphobic and the next she was. And that happened in 2016. It was very strange. I'm sure that's not what happened behind the scenes, but that's her public persona. That's kind of how it went down. Hermione fanfiction was controversial even before then because Draco, would bigoted be the right word towards what are called mudbloods in the series, which are wizards who are born of 2 muggle parents, which are humans that don't have magical powers. And so usually the fanfiction has some kind of enemies to lovers arc where Draco is dehumanizing of Hermione through a lot of the narrative, and then that mudbloods in general get humanized to him because of Hermione, and a lot of people felt icky about that even prior to the conversation surrounding J.K. Rowling. But I'll admit that my initial reaction was one of confusion on multiple fronts, because I was confused that the convention thought that bringing a published Hermione fanfiction author would be a good idea because of that, but I was also a little bit confused that it had led to this tier of backlash, because Hermione fanfiction is really, really popular. As much as it might weird people out, as much as a lot of people might feel like it shouldn't be as popular as it is fairly popular. And the conversation surrounding fanfiction and published fanfiction specifically, typically people feel that it harms the author. So that's where I was just really confused, because I was like, people are saying that she's supporting J.K. Rowling or being defensive of J.K. Rowling, when typically people feel that published fanfiction harms the author that the work is based off of. But there was a lot I did not know about this situation. Julie Soto and her publisher are actually heavily marketing this as a Hermione fanfiction and are tying it to Harry Potter in a lot of the marketing. And that also makes it very different to me. It's one thing for it to be an AU where the names are changed, and maybe that is where it came from and that's where the inspiration came from, but the final work is so different that it doesn't really matter. 50 Shades of Grey is like that. The Love Hypothesis is like that. I don't really have a problem with either of those books. I don't think they copied the source material, because they are so wildly different that even if the characters were loosely based on characters from different source material, the end work is so transformative that, you know, it's whatever. And it's different enough that you would never know if you didn't already know that. And then Julie Soto had come out and said, by the way, I don't support J.K. Rowling at all. And this story is like so separate from that that I just thought I wanted to publish it anyway, because it doesn't even really feel like a fan fiction to me anymore. I feel like she would have more of a leg to stand on. And that's kind of what I assumed was going on. I thought people just knew that this had been a Hermione fanfiction that was on Wattpad or AO3 or something. And so they just knew that that was the origin of it. But in reality, the author and the publisher are heavily marketing this as a Hermione fanfiction, which is confusing to me. A, because why did you think that was going to go over well with people? But B, just from a legal perspective, there's a legal gray area that published fan fiction sits in, where everybody kind of knows it's based off of certain source material, but it's just never talked about or admitted most of the time. So for them to be so out and about and loud and proud about this being Hermione and Draco with different names, J.K. Rowling is litigious, y'all. Like, I just feel like you should be a little bit more careful than that. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know where the line is. I don't know how transformative something has to be. But if you are being so out and about and loud and proud about the fact that the characters in this novel are the characters from a novel that somebody else wrote and you just changed the name for legal reasons, I feel like you're somewhat losing the legal protection of having changed the names. No? Like, if you yourself are connecting it all together, that's where I'm saying it's confusing on multiple fronts, because if you're marketing it that strong as a connection to Harry Potter, then you're really towing that line to supporting the artist herself. And you had to know that some people out there weren't going to react well to that. But not only that, it kind of feels like J.K. Rowling's not going to react well to this either. And there is a comment under this Reddit post that is somewhat saying the same thing I'm saying. Another trans person here. A big part of the problem is the marketing. The publishers are actively using the HP brand to market these books, not just Soto's, but also the other two. JKR is notoriously protective of her IP, and truly I find it hard to believe that she's not getting something for allowing them to market it this way. If the marketing and references weren't so tied to HP, I really don't think anyone would care. But this is off the end of JKR funding £70,000. I forgot that pounds are what the British call their money, and that confused me so bad for a second, sorry. Pounds into anti-trans organizations and bragging about it, and the massive setback of trans rights in the UK, largely due to her funding. Basically, it looks bad, and there's no way she's not getting paid for the use of their IP. So yeah, that's essentially what I'm trying to say here, is I was really confused when I thought it was just that people knew that this was a published Hermione fan fiction. I didn't realize that they were marketing it really heavily as tied to Harry Potter and as a Hermione fan fiction. I thought people just knew that because they were familiar with it. And so that does change things for me, and I think that changes things for a lot of people as well. I don't know about what they were saying about J.K. Rowling probably getting some money in exchange for that. I don't know about all that. I mean, JKR is notoriously very protective of her IP. They are correct about that. But I genuinely don't know if them being so open about it being based off of Harry Potter does put them at legal risk or not, because copying claims when it comes to books are notoriously very, 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 very hard to get through in a court of law. So I do think it's more likely than not that they're not paying J.K. Rowling anything, but that doesn't change what they're saying about the really strong tie and them being so open about it being Harry Potter fan fiction being part of what's questionable to people. It's not just that people knew it was a Hermione fan fiction and that that's where it started, and now they've changed all the names and stripped it of that and are publishing it. It's that they're marketing it as that and using Harry Potter as part of the marketing. So anyway, all of that to say that what ended up happening with the actual convention, because that is kind of where this started. They didn't really have very many authors that ended up attending. A lot of people pulled out after all of this started coming to light. There's a lot of people who were supposed to be involved in the actual event who ended up not being there, and as a result, the experience was pretty bare bones for the people that did attend. There weren't very many panels. It just ended up not really being a very good experience because there wasn't really anybody there for the attendees to interact with, and a lot of the attendees ended up deciding not to go too because of what was going on with the convention. And this really does beg the question, at what point do you cancel an event if you get the feeling that it's not going to go well? Because the difference between Mischief Management and all of the other poorly planned book conventions that have happened this year is that some of the other conventions, the people who hosted them have hosted an event, maybe two before, but the convention in question is their second event or their third event, right? Mischief Management has been open since 2009, and they host like multiple conventions a year with different themes surrounding them. This is a very experienced event planning company. You would think that they would be aware of how poorly this event was going to go in a way that maybe the other people who have had poorly run book conventions maybe wouldn't have realized, because of the depth of experience they have with event planning. And not only that, we never know what's happening behind the scenes. We never know the finances of a company, but presumably an event planning company that's existed for this long and hosts this many events a year maybe has a little bit more cushion to take a financial hit of refunding people for an event, as opposed to a random person who just decided to throw a convention. And so you would think that given both of those factors, they would have decided to cancel the convention after everybody backed out. And so maybe they were just trying to avoid having to refund people, and they don't think that that's going to impact people attending their other events. Just be careful, guys. Be careful when you're buying tickets to these events. It is frustrating to feel like we have to be so aware of who's hosting what event, and that you almost have to research the event planners before attending something. And that's why I feel like it makes sense to me that people didn't know about this right when they were first signing up for the convention or buying tickets, because who Googles the event planning company? If the convention is called Romance Con and I were looking into attending it, I probably would just be looking up Romance Con and reading information about it. I don't know that I would dig into what the name of the event planning company behind it is and whether or not they have any events that are supportive of any things that I don't support, but maybe I should. I have a little bit of empathy for the authors that signed up to attend and the people who had bought tickets before all of this came to light, because I can't imagine that I would have found this information before buying tickets either, and so I don't fault them for not knowing about it. I don't know. Unfortunately, there still is a large population of people out there who really have no morals when it comes to Harry Potter whatsoever and aren't open to any type of nuanced conversation about supporting J.K. Rowling, and just kind of have a perspective of, well, I love it and I want to be able to keep supporting it. And so I want to just be able to say that I don't support J.K. Rowling, but still support Harry Potter in full and not put any guardrails on my interaction with it, and not think about how that behavior might end up harming the trans community in the end. And there's unfortunately a very large population of people out there who feel that way. And I don't know if this event planning company is going to struggle to get people to attend their other events, or if there are enough people who don't really have an issue with this who will be fine continuing to attend events, or if it'll continue to be sort of what this situation was, where people just won't realize it's the same event planning company, because that's not usually something that people look into when they're buying tickets to an event. But like I said, maybe we should, not just to ensure that they aren't going against things that we believe in, but also just to protect ourselves from how horribly some of these conventions have gone, and the trend that we seem to be seeing of poorly planned conventions and people getting scammed in a way. even if that wasn't the intention of the event planners when they set out. Which brings us to the second convention I wanted to talk about, which was Once Upon a Con. Now, the situation with Once Upon a Con is a lot closer to A Million Lives Book Festival. It wasn't quite as bad as A Million Lives, but if that's our threshold, God help us. Just saying that it's better than A Million Lives Book Festival simply means that there were probably chairs at the panels, and that's not really saying anything, is it? So while Once Upon a Con did go better than A Million Lives Book Festival, there were quite a few things wrong with it that people were rightfully upset about. I found a post in r/fantasy where somebody had attended and they were talking about the good and the bad. So I'm basing a lot of what I'm going to say off of this post. This post does align with a lot of the TikToks that I've seen as well talking about this situation. But some of the good things that they listed are that the concept is cool to do a fantasy specific book event. The other people who attended the con were really nice, and everybody that they met at the actual convention was great. The venue was really beautiful. It was at the Gaylord in DC. There were a lot of really cool vendors, a lot of cool attending authors. They did a trinket trading thing that this person said they really enjoyed. And they shouted out the staff. With Once Upon a Con, a lot of the drama is actually surrounding the staff and the way they were treated. And this person makes sure to call that out, but they said that the people who did decide to stay and continue to help despite what was going on were very helpful. And so they wanted to shout those people out and say that the staff themselves were not really the problem. It's the organization behind the convention itself. But pre-convention, a lot of the stuff is very, very similar to what we heard about A Million Lives, where there was basically no information sent out ahead of time. Nobody knew where anything was going to be. There wasn't signage there to even direct people once they got there. There was no map. There was no schedule. On the official website, it turns out that all of that existed on the Discord for the event, but for some reason, the event organizers did not share what was on the Discord to the official website. And I find myself just amazed. Like, why not just post that stuff to the website? That doesn't make any sense. If you did the planning, why not just put the plans on the website? It's not that they didn't plan it, it's that they didn't make the plans accessible to everybody who was going to attend. And so if people didn't know about the Discord, then they wouldn't have known about any of this. It wasn't on the official website. It was only on the Discord, or a non-official Facebook group, it says as well. At the actual convention, they said that there wasn't a lot of signage, so it just would say Once Upon a Con, but it still also didn't tell you like what any of the panels were or why they were happening. And so there just was a lot of confusion as to where anything was. There was a big issue with an event that they were doing at the convention called the War Room that was supposed to be based off of Fourth Wing, and it was a scavenger hunt. Just a lot of snafu seemingly in actually executing it. It didn't start at the time it was supposed to. It took them forever to announce when they were actually going to be starting it, and it was early in the morning, and so a lot of people missed the announcement and they missed the actual start time. And then one of the challenges took them way longer to set up than it took people to do the first two challenges. So people got to a scavenger hunt sort of challenge and there wasn't actually stuff hidden for them to find yet, but how would they have known that? So a lot of people just got really discouraged because they thought things were hidden so well that they weren't going to be able to find them, when in reality they just weren't hidden yet. And then at the end they just announced winners after points were tallied, but no sort of point scoring thing was ever announced, so nobody knows how they picked the winners. So there was a special event. I actually don't know, based off of what this person is saying, if it was extra money or not. I certainly hope it wasn't extra money, but I presume that it was, given the description of it. And it essentially just didn't go very well, and there was a lot wrong with it. There were also workshops with fees, and the attendees were told that the fees were going to be towards materials that were used to create their own version of whatever it was that the person teaching the panel was going to be teaching them to make. But when people actually attended that workshop, the person hosting it was like, I have no idea what they're talking about. I had zero intention of any of you making anything. I didn't bring any materials for you, and they didn't give me any money. They didn't even tell me they were charging you guys. You should definitely ask for a refund, because I don't know, like, you're not going to leave with anything. Like, people thought that they were paying extra for this workshop because it meant they were going to be given materials to make something, and then they were going to leave with that item. And that's not what ended up happening. They just paid for this workshop for no reason, basically. Then there were the panels. And this is where it gets into some of the drama with the staff. And this is where it really, really aligns with A Million Lives Book Festival. They did not book a hotel for the people that they told they were going to have hotel rooms for. So there were a bunch of people who showed up, thought that they were going to have a place to stay, didn't, had to fork out their own money out of pocket super unexpectedly to just have a place to sleep for the night. And so a lot of them ended up going home and not actually attending the convention because they either didn't want to or couldn't afford to pay for a hotel for the whole entire weekend. That piece of the A Million Lives story was one of the worst parts of it to me, because there's a genuine lack of safety in that. There's a genuine putting people at risk that feels like it goes a tier beyond just hosting an event that people didn't enjoy or had issues with. Because what if somebody can't afford to book a hotel? Where are they going to stay? What are they going to do? Even just the assumption that somebody might have a credit card that they could put it on, even if they can't front the money right then, like not everybody has that either. What if somebody genuinely didn't have the ability to book a hotel room last minute? Where are they going to stay? What are they going to do? That is like a tier of a lack of safety and respect for people that I just can't wrap my brain around. Why does that piece of these conventions keep happening? Or are these event planners just not realizing how expensive it is to book a block of hotel rooms? Or are they not actually doing it until the last minute? If I were hosting one of these events and I were going to promise people hotel rooms as a part of them attending the event, then I would book the hotel rooms before I did that. So I would make sure I had the hotel rooms reserved, have a certain amount, know how much money that was going to cost me, and know that I had the money to pay it before I promised anybody a hotel room. And if at any point in time the writing was on the wall that something went awry and I wasn't going to be able to provide those hotel rooms anymore, people would be notified immediately. I just don't understand why so many of these convention hosts feel like this is something they can fuck around with. You cannot tell people that you're going to have a place for them to stay and then have them show up day of and find out that you don't have a place for them to stay. That's a very, very dangerous situation to be putting people in. And even if everybody in attendance could afford to book their own hotel room for the night, it's still a shitty thing to do to them. I can understand being arrogant and thinking you can plan an event and not knowing anything about event planning and not realizing how difficult it's going to be and getting in over your head. I cannot wrap my brain around being so okay with putting people in such an unsafe situation and leading them to believe that I still had a place for them to stay, only for them to find out day of that I didn't. I truly do not think there is any empathy out there in me for that. Everybody makes mistakes. We're all human. If somebody gets in over their head planning an event and they don't know exactly how to handle it coming out the other side, I don't necessarily think that makes them a terrible person. I do think they owe people refunds in that situation, but I'm not necessarily going to jump to the conclusion that somebody's a horrible person. But I truly cannot imagine what good-natured and well-meaning person would be okay allowing dozens of people to arrive at a location expecting to have a safe place to stay for the night because you told them that that would be the case, only for that to have not been the case and you never informed them. I can't have empathy for that. I can't have understanding for that. That's too unsafe. That's insane. And unfortunately, because of the seeming trend of this happening, if any of you watching are authors or other content creators who are potentially going to accept an invite to one of these events that involves free travel, I'm not saying refuse it, but I am saying potentially to protect yourself, having to have a plan for if the free hotel doesn't actually exist. Knowing going into it that you have the finances to cover one night in a hotel room if they're actually not going to provide it for you. Because now that this has happened twice to our knowledge and potentially could have happened more times that we just didn't hear about, I just feel like there's an element of protecting ourselves that we have to do now, where it's like if you're being told you're gonna have a hotel provided, is there a way to insist upon proof that the hotels are gonna be provided before going out there? Is it potentially contacting the hotel yourself outside of the convention and verifying that they have a block of hotel rooms booked and that one of them has your name on it? Or just knowing going into it that you have the finances or have a credit card that you could use to book a night in a hotel room if you have to and then fly home the next day instead, should that unfortunately be the situation that you're put in. But going back to this Reddit post, this person says they completely understand why the panelists left and they do not blame the people who were supposed to be in the panels, who were supposed to get free hotel rooms, who didn't get those hotel rooms, who left the event as a result, for not showing up to the panels. Like their frustration is not with those panelists. Their frustration is with the event for A, not providing hotel rooms that they did promise to people, and B, not canceling the panels when those panelists back out, and not informing any of the attendees that those panels weren't going to happen. Because a bunch of people ended up showing up to panels where they thought a whole panel was going to be happening, and either the entire panel was canceled because everybody left, or there were 1 or 2 panelists left, but there was nobody to moderate it, or other people had to step up to host it or be a part of it because there was nobody else there. And that this person is rightfully pointing out that there are layers of failure at the convention level for that happening, both with them not having the hotel rooms to begin with, but also for them then not informing people when all of this went down and people left. So if you are hosting an event at a convention center that has a hotel attached to it, and you want to book a block of hotel rooms for people that you are bringing out for the event, it behooves you to do that pretty early. I would argue around the time that you're booking the convention center itself or the ballroom at the hotel, talking right then to the hotel about how much it would cost to get a block of hotel rooms, knowing exactly how many you could afford, and then making sure that you only offer out the amount that you can afford. And if that means that some people aren't going to attend because they want a free hotel and free travel in order to attend, then that means that you don't get to book those people. It just is what it is. You know what I'm saying? And finally, for their initial downsides they were bringing up, this person talked about the ballroom decorations, where it wasn't quite at the Million Lives level, where they didn't even have music and they had a security guard bring a speaker. They at the very least had a DJ, but there just weren't very many decorations, and it wasn't really an immersive ball. It was just kind of a convention hall ballroom with a DJ, but at the very least they did have a DJ. So there is that. And then this Redditor went on to describe what were multiple safety concerns beyond just what I brought up about the hotel, all of which is really horrifying to me given that this was a public event with a lot of attendees. Security at these massive public events is not something that you can mess around with under normal circumstances, but we are not under normal circumstances in America right now when it comes to safety at public event. We are in unprecedented times. We are in very dangerous times to be in public, and it was never the time to lax on this kind of stuff, but it is especially not the time now to be laxing on this stuff, given that 47 school shootings have happened already this school year, and we are only 2 months into it. No weapons were allowed at the convention in theory, but they were not checking anybody's props, anybody's weapons. There is a big festival that happens in Phoenix where a lot of people dress in cosplay. It's called Phoenix Fan Fusion. It's a massive event. They have cops check people's props. I'm going to tell you guys a story. I don't mean to freak you out with this. This is just why, like, this one specifically of the 3 listed here as safety concerns freaks me out so much. When I went to Fan Fusion 2 years ago, so 2024 June, I was in line to get my prop checked. And there was a guy in front of me who had a real magazine of actual assault rifle bullets. Just like a big magazine that he wanted to wear across his body as a part of his costume, and they were actual real bullets. The police officers were like, no. And the guy stood there arguing with them. He was arguing for his right to bring an assault rifle magazine, a real one, into this convention. It wasn't foam. These were actual bullets that you could put into an assault rifle and shoot people with. And the police were like, no, man, we can't let you bring this in. What are you talking about? They get into an argument with him, and the guy was standing there insisting that he should be allowed. He doesn't have a gun on him, so why is it a problem? And when the cop finally says to him, dude, how did you even get this? I don't even think this is legal. That was when he just snatched up the magazine and walked away. There were 3 cops at that table, and one of them followed him. I have no idea how all of that ended up going, but I can tell you the relief on that officer's face when I walked up with the shittiest foam, like whatever, that anybody's ever seen. I don't say that to insult myself. I just say that to say it was very obvious that it wasn't real. And he was like, you can bring that in. And he really made a show of checking it too, which I thought was very funny. So anyway, like people try sometimes to bring real weapons into these events and maybe not even clicking for them why that might be dangerous or a problem. But the police, I think, were very within their right to turn that man away, because how do they not know that you haven't hidden the gun itself somewhere in the convention but couldn't get the bullets in or something like that, right? Like, how do they know that you're not going to somehow get access to a gun that you could use those bullets in? Why would they let you in with the bullets? I actively witnessed somebody try to enter an event with a magazine of assault rifle bullets. And yes, I live in Phoenix, Arizona, where we have concealed carry, and there's a giant bullet semi-truck that just drives around the city and pulls over and has a big sign that says, buy your bullets here, and you can just buy bullets there, and that's legal. I grew up in that setting with that proximity to guns, and I cannot tell you the relief that I felt actually watching the security measures at this place work and seeing them turn somebody away to not be able to bring something in because it was a real weapon. Like, people try to do that, and they apparently did not have anybody screening it, anybody checking to see if any of the props were fake or real. As this person pointed out, somebody could have had a knife that they were just saying was fake, could have been a real knife because nobody actually looked. People wear swords as a part of their costume. What if that sword's actually sharp? Sometimes it's not even about people having malicious intent, but just people being kind of stupid. But not only that, apparently there weren't any badge checks. They weren't checking anybody in. They weren't checking that anybody had an actual ticket. So not only were they not checking weapons, but literally anybody could have just walked in. It goes beyond just not being fair to the people who bought tickets, because apparently you didn't have to buy a ticket to go because they weren't even going to check. But once again, they're not checking weapons. Anybody can just walk in. They're not even checking that the person actually bought the ticket to an event. If a malicious actor wanted to hurt people at this convention, there were genuinely no safeguards in place to stop them whatsoever. They could have just walked right in with a weapon and hurt people. And there was no security to stop that from happening. And the third is underage drinking. I'm not a narc. Honestly, maybe it's once again because I grew up in Arizona, where we have quite a bit of a reputation when it comes to this kind of thing. If they were trying to prevent people from underage drinking and some people got around it through fake IDs or something like that, I'm not losing any sleep over some kids drinking, okay? That was me once upon a time. But apparently they weren't even checking people's IDs or trying to screen for if people were old enough. So I do think that there is an element of risk there, because the older you get, the more self-control that you have over yourself, the more likely you are to prevent yourself from drinking excessively. There also are issues with kids not always wanting to go to the hospital for excessive drinking if there is a problem happening because they're concerned they're going to get in trouble. Just so you guys are aware, hospitals very much have a policy of not turning in people to the police for things like overdoses and excessive drinking, even if the person's underage, because they want to encourage people to go to the hospital to get medical help if they need it. It's not really any of their business if you were breaking the law when you got hurt. It's just their business to help you not be hurt anymore. And unless they believe that you are going to turn around and leave the hospital and harm others or yourself, then they are not going to get the police involved. That's not legal advice, by the way. Don't blame me if that ends up not being the case at a very rare, very niche hospital. But I do know people who ended up in the hospital for excessive drinking when they were underage. I don't know anybody who ever got an MIC from that. But all of that to say that there are statistics to support that people who drink underage are more likely to binge drink and overdrink. A lot of that they think is due to impulse control. The older you get, the less likely you are to excessively drink. And people who are underage are less likely to go to the hospital for alcohol poisoning because they are concerned about getting in trouble. And there are significantly more alcohol poisoning related deaths in people under the age of 21 as a result. So for all of those reasons, I do still think that it is the responsibility of people who are over the age of 21 hosting these events to follow the law and ID check people and do what they can to try and limit underage drinking. I'm just not losing any sleep over the concept of kids drinking. I've seen some people react to this who were super horrified by the idea that people under the age of 21 were able to drink at this event. I just feel like it's more nuanced than that. I don't really feel like it's that big a deal if people got around the rules and were able to drink. But I think those rules, while they don't always do the best to prevent kids from drinking to begin with, they do sometimes prevent the excessive drinking, and that's the part that's really dangerous. And reading more on the alcohol thing here, it seems as though people were also able to just bring bottles into the event because, again, they had like no security. That's also very dangerous because you never know if somebody's going to spike something like that. You should never, ever, 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 ever accept a drink from anybody at an event like this if you don't know them. Do not let somebody directly hand you a drink, and certainly do not let somebody pour you a drink out of a bottle that didn't come from the bartender at the actual event. I know that sometimes in the moment you can feel kind of pressured to accept the drink from the person if they've already purchased it. Do not. Watch the bartender make the drink. Have the bartender hand it directly to you. Do not accept random drinks from people, and certainly do not accept drinks poured out of bottles that were not sourced at the actual event. You have no idea what's in that bottle. You have no idea what's in there. And so the fact that the event was allowing that because they didn't have anybody checking what people were bringing in, like, this is what I mean about it just being so unsafe. And that's where I'm saying I have a lot less empathy for something like that, because if the result of your actions are that people paid money for an experience that they didn't enjoy, that does suck. And I'm not saying that that's not a shitty thing that we absolutely should call out, because of course it is. At the same time, that is not the same severity level to me as putting a mass number of people at risk to the degree that happened at this convention. You had a bunch of people who showed up who just didn't have a place to stay because you told them you'd have a place for them to stay, and then you didn't. You had no weapons checking, no ticket checking, no barriers in place to stop people from just walking in and harming somebody if they wanted to. And that is something that is happening a lot in America. And people apparently were able to just bring in random bottles of whatever, and nobody knows what's in there, and they're just passing around having everybody drink it. They should be so thankful that nobody was harmed. I don't know how they made it through this whole thing without anybody ending up overnight not having a place to stay, or excessively drinking, or having a drink spiked, or having somebody come in with a weapon. And again, they don't even have to have malicious intent at that point. Sometimes people are just stupid with sharp things. I don't know how they ended up making it through this weekend without anybody being harmed. It's truly a miracle. I'm very grateful that that is the case, but that was not the case because of the actions of the event organizers or any preventative measures that they put in place. We were just lucky that that was the case, and that's disgusting to me. That's gonna be it for me today, you guys. Careful out here buying tickets to these events. It unfortunately seems like a lot of research needs to go into the decision to go. And I don't want to say let an event run a few times before you buy a ticket, because I don't want it to be difficult for new book conventions to get off the ground if the organizers have their stuff together and are going to put on a good event. I want to give new events a chance, but maybe take into account how far the event is away from your home and how much of a financial hit it would be for you to cancel your trip when booking. Make sure that you look into the event planning company itself as well as the event before booking. And if you're an author or a content creator or a book person of any kind who's being offered to go to one of these things for free, and they're offering to pay for your travel and to pay for your hotel, be wary, be suspicious, do your best to confirm before you get there that you actually are going to have a hotel. What do you guys think? Have any of you attended a book convention that's gone well? Let's get some positivity going in the comments. Everybody suggest book conventions that have gone well and have been properly planned in the comments so that we can get some recommendations for things that we can attend that are probably a safer investment of our money. I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!